And this really, I think, shows us the difference between people who have negotiated with Russians over time in complex situations, knowing how long it takes, years sometimes, for things like arms control agreements. It takes a long time to work this. And yet you've got a guy, you've got Trump, but also Marco Rubio and Waltz and Witkoff. They're not seasoned Russian negotiators.
Now, I want to welcome to the programme a big warm welcome to Jim Townsend, who's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Jim, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Tell me, Jim, what do you make of what we've heard from Vladimir Putin?
Well, it's such a scramble to put it all together. I thought your previous guest was excellent. She said all the right things, too. You know, I guess on the one hand, I'm not surprised because particularly the fighting in Kursk, Putin feels he's got things going his way. And so why would he have a pause? And again, your guest pointed this out. Why would you have a pause in the fighting that can potentially threaten what Putin has been able to do on the battlefield there in Kursk, which is his top priority? You know, again, like your guest said, they can't go into a negotiation, the Russians, with Kursk being partially occupied by Ukraine. So they've got to get rid of this, number one. But also, I think a big thing, too, is Putin knows how badly Trump wants this.
Right.
Trump is out there exposed right now, and so he's going to get something for it. He is going to lay on the table a great buffet of requirements that he wants Trump to fulfill before he'll say anything.
Right, but it's a buffet of requirements that just cannot be consumed if Putin, Jim, is talking about stopping Ukraine's friends from providing arms and support to Ukraine during a ceasefire. Well, neither Ukraine nor Ukraine's friends can agree to that, possibly, can they?
That's right.
I mean, that's one thing that cannot simply go ahead. And if we're waiting for basically the completion of a victory in Kursk, well, you know, it may be going reasonably well in some ways for Russian forces in Kursk, but that's an objective which is still a little way off. It looks, doesn't it, as if in the end Putin is playing hard for time, as much time as he thinks he needs, and he's letting everyone else dangle and wait. He wants it all on his own terms, in other words.
That's right. And that's the way he likes to approach things. And that's why he feels he can do that now. He's in a position to play it out and to demand a maximum response.
Yeah.
The question becomes Trump. How much patience does he have for this? And this really, I think, shows us the difference between people who have negotiated with Russians over time in complex situations, knowing how long it takes, years sometimes, for things like arms control agreements. It takes a long time to work this. And yet you've got a guy, you've got Trump, but also Marco Rubio and Waltz and Witkoff. They're not seasoned Russian negotiators. So
yes.
Will Trump's reaction be, will he blow up and walk out? And what will happen? Does he have the patience to see this through? I think the next move by Trump is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that is putting your finger, I think, on a really important point at this moment, this afternoon at 19 minutes past 4 our time. The pressure in many ways is now right back on Trump, isn't it? And he's meeting Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, well, in a couple of hours' time. So what will Rutte be asking of Trump? Because now, well, there are things that NATO, Ukraine and Ukraine's friends want from Donald Trump today. What should that list be?
Boy, you know, there's a list, and I think sitting in front of Trump as the NATO Secretary General, Rutte has to be careful on what he wants to talk about, what he will ask for, or how he will assure Trump that actually things at NATO are going well, and that he shouldn't give up on the alliance. So his agenda, Rutte's agenda going in there, can't be occupied by just Ukraine. He's got to worry about this summit coming up in June and making sure that Trump's first summit and his first summit too, Rutte's first summit, that it goes well. And part of that is flattery in front of Trump, saying you have really helped the allies now spend much more money on defense. Things are going really well there compared to how they were a few years ago when you were president the first time. He's gonna have to go in there and say, we really need to make sure that you reinforce your commitment to NATO on Article 5, the way the alliance came to the U.S. assistance when Article 5 was invoked. So his agenda is going to be really focused on that summit and getting U.S. commitments. But, Trump might be coming in there and maybe he'll say to the NATO Secretary General, well, I'm going to need your help with the Russians. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be a real battle of two big agendas between those two officials.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, has got a lot on his plate. He's got a piled high in tray, but it does sort of seem that, having now heard from Vladimir Putin, maybe the most pressing thing is to address what Putin is doing, to face Putin, look him in the eye and say, look, come to the table. You need to come to the table, not cloud the issue with some of the points you're raising today, some of them which look impossible to meet. At least come and sit down. And Trump does have leverage here. He does have it within his power to apply the kind of pressure on Putin that would hurt, that would make the Russian president think again. That's got to be high on Rutte's list of things to say, hasn't it?
Well, it's an interesting question because really the only stick that Trump has right now is financial. And then Trump has already warned the Russians that he's going to make the financial situation really tough if Putin doesn't come to the table. Yeah. But I'm not so sure how hard a stick that is.
But let me ask you this, Jim. Let me ask you this. You say the only stick that he has is a financial one. And true, Donald Trump has spoken about applying, well, vaguely worded, vaguely expressed sanctions at some point, which he said would hurt Russia. He hasn't said what they would be. But before the election, you'll remember very well that some of those around Donald Trump were saying, look, if Putin has to be pushed to the table, we will pour weapons into the arms of Ukraine. We will make it very uncomfortable for Vladimir Putin. Haven't heard anything about that since the election. He does have that card, though, in his grasp.
Well, he does have that card, but I wonder if even that card spooks Putin. He's had, under Biden, he had a big flow of weaponry, and the Russians seem to have been able to deal with that. So if Trump were to say, hey, I'm going to turn on the tap with stuff that you've never seen before, I think if I were Putin, I'd call his bluff and say, look, that doesn't scare us. We've been here for 4 years. What are you going to give Ukraine that you haven't already? Yeah. And good luck getting that through your Congress. I think Putin also knows that he's got a political machine behind him that's not so happy about giving things to Ukraine. Yeah. One more point back to the Rutte meeting. When Rutte sits down, he is representing a lot of allies who have a very different view of Russia than Trump does. Trump's view is softer on Putin, softer on Russia. Sure. And I think we will see in that meeting a split between the perspective and the context that Rutte brings on the one hand and the way Trump is thinking on the other hand. It'd be interesting to see how they talk about Russia. Are they going to talk about Russia from two different points? Yeah, well, Putin has laid down a gauntlet. What a testing moment this is. Well, certainly for Putin, but also for the supporters of Ukraine, for Donald Trump too, in a significant way. And I'm really grateful to you for your analysis this afternoon on these breaking developments. Jim Townsend, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Europe and NATO.